Okie doke. So, hello everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. So, it's organized by the Curriculum 2025 team, and it's the first in a series of webinars. Each webinar will be focusing on a different topic centered around curriculum design and delivery. One of those themes is sustainability and social responsibility, which mainly focuses on how the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals can be embedded into the curriculum for all students. So I'm Stacey Jones and I will be your host today. And we are joined by guest speakers. So we've got Dr. Caroline Wilson from Curriculum 2025. We have Meg Baker from Responsible Futures. We have Dr. Jaliyyah Ahmadu-Bello from the Faculty of Business and Law, and they will all be giving different perspectives and also sharing their experiences of embedding the SDGs into the curriculum, and hopefully provide you with some practical tips to enable you to go away and think about how you can embed some of the SDGs into your curriculum. So we won't need you to use your microphone or camera throughout, so please keep these switched off. However, you can post questions at any time during the webinar using the chat function. So my colleague Nik Beer from Curriculum 2025 will be keeping an eye on the chat and all of your questions, and she will collate them together for a panel Q&A at the end with all of the speakers. The webinar is due to last approximately 1 hour. Please note that the webinar is being recorded, and so it will be shared internally and externally afterwards. And also, please bear with us. We are putting our faith in technology, so to bring together speakers from all over the country to your living rooms today. So fingers crossed the technology is on our side. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Caroline, who will provide you with a background to the SDGs and to Curriculum 2025. So hi, Caroline. I'm going to stop sharing my webinar and give you full control. Thank you.
Oh, the power. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon. My part in this webinar is to introduce the role that Curriculum 2025 has in supporting the university to embed the Sustainable Development Goals into the curriculum. It's very much a follow-on to the materials in the Curriculum 2025 course some of you may have been on, but don't worry, it doesn't rely on any of that information for you to fully participate today. So the goal of Curriculum 2025 is for every course in the university, hang on, let me just flick through, to be able to demonstrate 8 particular characteristics, and that's in addition to any discipline specifics or professional body accreditation and so on. Our success will be measured by contributing to improvements in course health data. Now, several of these themes can be implemented alongside each other. It's not 8 separate bodies of work in a way. So, for instance, I think that co-creation, inclusion, and decolonisation, for instance, can also be co-benefits of including sustainable development in the curriculum. And we can perhaps talk about some of those examples of that later on. So this slide just fleshes out a little bit about what do we mean by sustainability and social responsibility, and how will we be operationalizing it, if you like. Sustainability and sustainable development are terms obviously emanating from the sort of 1980s, where they became mainstream ideas. The Sustainable Development Goals really start to spell out what were previously, if we're honest, rather vague ambitions which didn't have clear goals or clear measures to know when we've arrived at sustainable development. So I think the SDGs give us a great structure to help courses outside what, if you like, that inner circle of those courses such as geography, energy use, and environment management, where the links are obvious. It gives all courses a real opportunity to get involved because they cover the initial people, profit, planet, overarching concerns about sustainability in much more concrete terms. The 17 goals for those who are not too familiar, were adopted by all the world's governments at the UN in 2015, and they're due to be achieved by 2030. And they represent really big challenges requiring big imagination, big ideas from the next generation of decision makers. So they're very highly focused on students' wants, needs, and requirements for the future. So another important thing I think to draw out is that each one is underpinned by indicators, measures for where we have to be by 2030. Example, so the target of reducing under the goal 8, the target of reducing the proportion of young people not in employment, education or training can of course be directly measured. Now I know that Jaliyyah is going to talk a little bit more about targets and how they give us something tangible to work with. So I'll leave that there for now. Just one quickie whilst we're on this slide. The UN has made available some really good high quality images of all of the goals, which will enhance any learning materials you use, and that link will be live later on. One of the goals, goal 4, is a useful catch-all, if you like, because it talks about education and the target that by 2030 all learners will have the knowledge they need to be the agents and engineers of change. I think the word promote doesn't suggest everybody needs to be into marketing. I think it's about that people will be able to live and breathe and be sustainable in the way they live. Now, of course, we at graduate level, we're not really just looking for knowledge. We want students to be able to think about the SDGs systematically. We want them to be able to challenge current ways of operating and negotiate alternatives, to evaluate consequences, learning outcomes of kind of that nature. Now, there's such a lot of information about the SDGs. It is really difficult to know where to start. So what we've tried to do is to pull together the best and also to signpost what is best for. I don't know if you've maximized the slides area of your screen, but you might just want to click on the button that helps you make it massive size. So I can kind of just run through a few bits and pieces. So you're going to be leaving today with access to a shareable notebook of links, links to books, academic journals, videos, and other materials focused on the teaching of the SDGs. And this, we've tried to create this set of materials so that it contains learning outcomes, ideas for activities, sample seminars that other people have used that could help you adapt into your own subject. And if you look down the list of kind of headings, we've tried to include sort of simple intros, starting points, if you like, but also run through to some more complex ideas for students at level 5 and level 6, for instance. So I'm just going to zoom in to some of those more detailed materials for students at level 5 and level 6. And this is starting to encourage students to work with a key aspect of sustainable development, which is the interdependence of many of the goals and the potential conflicts in achieving them. So as an example, maybe achieving zero hunger, which is goal 2, is challenging to do at the same time as protecting biodiversity on land and in the ocean, which are goals 14 and 15, avoiding intensive farming, for instance. Now, there's a growing academic literature that points to these problems of interdependence, and argue that the goals won't be met by tackling them piecemeal. So one way around this is to look instead at some of the biggest changes coming along in our world that will make the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals possible. and I've zoomed in on one of those. So there's been 6 listed, and one of them is digital revolution for sustainable development, and the digital mould of our future sustainable lives. I want to illustrate how that might be useful in a curriculum setting. So on the notebook, there's a description of what that means, this digital revolution, a list of subjects which most align with these topics, which is listed on the screen, and it's followed by some suggested topics, challenges, questions that you might use in a course setting, so in other words, this is where courses are tackling more than 1 or 2 very obvious sustainable development goals, but really mixing them up. So that's a very quick run through some materials that we're making available today. They're just the very start of a journey, I think we should be clear about. We're at the Curriculum 25, we're here to support you in identifying ways you think that incorporating sustainable development into curriculum will enhance and add value to your module. I think some contact details follow later on. Very happy to elaborate a lot more during the chat and also after today. But I think now what's planned is that Stacey is going to switch control away from me, and we're going to speak to Meg Baker. Meg is going to speak about the work she does with Coventry and other universities around the topic of sustainable development. So I'm going to hand over to Meg.
Hi, just bear with me. I'm just trying to share my webcam. It seems to be loading. This worked fine in the practice yesterday. Stacey, am I sharing my slides from my side, or are you sharing my slides? I can't remember.
Meg, the slides are already there, so you should have control of them.
Oh, okay.
To move everyone through them. Don't worry if your webcam doesn't work.
Shall I just cancel them? Perfect. Okay, great. So I'll skip on. So I'm Meg Baker. I'm from Students Organising for Sustainability UK. And I'm going to talk to you about Responsible Futures, which is a programme which Coventry University and Students' Union are part of. And it's basically, although it's not been mapped against the Sustainable Development Goals, and it does actually aim to achieve very similar things to the 17 SDGs. So I think that that's what we'll share here, and I've decided to try and frame this presentation around how Responsible Futures supports the partnerships, and the partnerships, when I talk about them, are the university and the Students' Union, how they're achieving and addressing the Sustainable Development Goals by using Responsible Futures as a framework. Yeah, so it's quite cool, very exciting. It's useful to know because for the last 10 years, we've been carrying out research and gathering data to understand student perceptions of sustainability and sustainable development and what they want. Because although we want to make sure that our education systems are providing the learning opportunities for students that ensure that we're creating a better future, we also want to ensure that that's what the students want. I speak from Students Organising for Sustainability UK, so like student voice is at the heart of everything that we do. And we launched in October. Prior to that, we were the NUS sustainability team. So here you can see a really interesting chart which shows that for the last 10 years, over 80% of students have been consistently saying that I don't think it's copied across quite right, but they've been consistently agreeing with this statement that my university or college should actively incorporate and promote sustainable development. So hearing about what Caroline was just discussing there is totally spot on with what the national demand is from students in terms of connecting education with sustainable development. We've also, in 2017-18, we carried out this. So for 17 months, we asked students who are members of the NUS Extra database who'd said that they were open to us contacting them for survey information. And we found out that 67% of students prior to us starting that series of questions on a monthly basis hadn't actually heard of the Sustainable Development Goals. And prior to answering a survey about them, but 61% say that they would actually like to learn more about the SDGs. Not surprisingly, 81% agree that the UK government should actively lead and support achievement of the SDGs. But I think that universities have civic responsibilities too, so it definitely fits really well with that, to ensure that future graduates have the skills to be able to ensure that they can also work towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, or whatever they look like when we go beyond 2030. Goal 13, climate action, is seen as the most important goal by students, and it's reported as being the most important issue facing the world today by students. So a lot of that has synergy with what we're trying to achieve here. I think it's just good to have that background of student perceptions and perspectives and what their opinions are for the demand of this. So now moving on to Responsible Futures. Responsible Futures is themed around and framed around education for sustainable development. Some of you may be really familiar with this terminology, and others it may be new for you. So I'm just going to give you the overview and the definition, which was created through a collaboration of the Higher Education Academy and Quality Assurance Agency, and it's within their guidance on education for sustainable development, which was launched in 2014, and it's currently being reviewed to be launched this summer, a reviewed version. But this is their definition, and it's all about going beyond just learning about sustainable development, but actually achieving the knowledge, skills, and attributes to be able to safeguard the environment, society, and economy in the present and in the future. So it's like equipping with skills and knowledge, not just having knowledge and not knowing what to do with it. It's going beyond that, which is really exciting. I think that that's how education should be, and it promotes interactive learning and applied learning opportunities. So the framework's been set up in a way in which we aim to ensure that education for sustainable development is embedded in these three areas, these three spheres of the curriculum. The formal curriculum, which is obviously your standard programs of study that students apply to go to university to do, it's your coursework, it's your assessed learning. Within the informal curriculum, so often that falls within the Students' Union, but it's not necessarily only in the Students' Union. It can go beyond that. It can be volunteering opportunities. So where students learn through non-academically assessed learning is generally in the informal curriculum. And then we have the subliminal curriculum, where we look to ensure that students can engage with and almost learn by osmosis. So developing an understanding of sustainability through experiencing it within their institutional and Students' Union culture whilst they're at their university through their student experience. So through this framework, which I'll get onto, I'll go through the details of it, Responsible Futures aims to ensure that we're preparing students for the work of the world, not just the world of work. There's a really famous quote, and do feel free to use it again if you want to. So Responsible Futures, it's a whole institution approach to embedding sustainability throughout student learning. And it basically, we see it as a good practice framework. Oh, this is awesome. This is actually a coincidence, but this is a photo of Vanessa and two of your Students' Union officers from last year being presented with their Responsible Futures accreditation certificate last year at the National Student Sustainability Summit. So it's a framework for good practice and a supported change programme. So the framework provides criteria which is deliberately slightly, it's open so that partnerships can approach it in a way in which it will fit with their institutional needs, priorities, and ways of working. And it's a partnership approach between the Students' Union and the university to ensure that student voice is kept at the heart of how it's done and how it works, to promote really meaningful and impactful change. And and it's an accreditation mark which is audited by students, and you have your audit coming up next week, which is really exciting. It's going to be a 3-day audit held on Zoom, and you're actually doing it in partnership with the University of Worcester to promote even greater knowledge exchange, so that the students can learn from the 2 different partnerships how they're approaching responsible futures, to gain a really deep understanding of what organisational change for sustainability looks like. We've got over 30 universities and colleges in the UK who've been actively engaged with Responsible Futures since it launched in 2014. And not 2014, 2017. When it launched, there were 13 pilot institutions, and so we've over doubled the engagement, which is amazing. Yeah, and we're seeing those numbers grow, but we're also working in partnership with the International Association of Universities to launch an international pilot, ideally this year, but obviously with the current pandemic, things may slightly change, we're not sure. It's a multifaceted change and intervention framework. So within the framework, the criteria requirements across the Responsible Futures framework, we've got all these different levels of change that are required to embed sustainability. And with that, it could be the Sustainable Development Goals at all levels of learning and all levels of learning for both staff and students. So it looks to embed sustainability and social responsibility in policy and strategy, potentially in revalidation or validation processes for academic qualifications, to introduce new graduate attributes or to enhance graduate attributes to ensure that the visions and the goals of the SDGs, essentially in this context, and sustainable development fit within what graduate skills should look like when they finish university at Coventry University, for example. To support staff to be able to achieve this, because that's key. And I guess that's something that's going to come up out of your Curriculum 2025 work, to ensure that staff feel supported and have the professional development opportunities to be able to progress this work. And then also, like, naturally, as a program led by Students Organising for Sustainability, this is all about engaging students and staff to collaborate and work together, to encourage students to campaign for change on their course by training course reps and championing education for sustainable development in student and staff meetings. So this is how the cycle works. A partnership joins Responsible Futures, and then it generally takes 1 to 3 years as they work their way through a toolkit which is hosted online, until they feel ready to be audited for accreditation. But during that process, they get ongoing support from us. We also have national support days. We've got one on Thursday, which I think Caroline's joining, which is being hosted by our Responsible Futures host partnerships. We share resources and promote knowledge exchange through cohort working of all the participating partnerships nationally. And yeah, we host a student-led audit. So we train the students to give them greater understanding of sustainability and change theory and what that might look like. And then they go through and review all the evidence that's been submitted by the partnership to decide whether or not it looks like they've achieved accreditation. And yeah, it's really impactful. And that's an aspect of the program which we find that staff find really valuable, because students provide feedback and recommendations on what they think's worked well and what they've been impressed by, as well as opportunities for progression and development. So this is just a quick overview of the things that are covered within the criteria. I think that what I want to do is make sure that I'm connecting this presentation with the SDGs. So if we think about the SDGs as a framework for sustainability, then it's clear that Goal 4, and specifically Goal 4.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals, calls for us to use education as a means of equipping all people with the knowledge and skills to tackle sustainability challenges. And Responsible Futures does just this, and it has a proven track record to do it. It hasn't been mapped against the SDGs as such, because almost all criteria would broadly fulfill similar goals of education, partnerships, action for climate, etc. However, Responsible Futures partnerships do frame their Responsible Futures of work around themes that resonate with their culture and of their institution. And for many right now, that's the SDGs. So I'm going to like shortly I'll share you some examples of how a couple of universities are doing this at the moment. But some examples include doing a curriculum mapping audit against the SDGs, training course reps on them, using the SDGs as an entry point to understanding the breadth of sustainability in academic professional development, and using the SDGs to broaden the aspect of sustainability covered by courses and modules during learning and teaching development through quality assurance processes. These are some examples of some of the actions, but we've been able to calculate that well over 500. In fact, last time I counted, it was more like 800 actions have been taken by Responsible Futures partnerships as a result of participating in the programme. And these include curriculum audits, passing SU policy on sustainable development, cohort working, graduate attributes to include sustainability, establishing living lab projects, diversifying the curriculum. Lots of these things are things that you're trying to achieve through Curriculum 2025. So there's so much synergy, it's amazing. Here's some examples of, I'm aware of time as well, so I'm just going to keep going on. So here are some examples of where the SDGs and Responsible Futures have been connected from across the sector. The first example is Anglia-Ruskin University, and they're actually one of our host partnerships for this year. They applied to be a host partnership, and that means that they have kind of volunteered themselves to provide peer support. So if anybody wants to hear about how they're doing their Ruskin modules, which I'm about to speak about, that kind of connects with Curriculum 2025 as well. But the university have decided to strategically embed sustainability in their work. So they recently appointed a new DVC for education, who launched a new education policy, which makes explicit commitment to developing students' knowledge, skills and competencies for sustainability and social responsibility. It includes a requirement for undergraduates to do a 15-credit breadth module, which is focused on global challenges. And then Alison Gregg, who's the Director of Education for Sustainable Development at Anglia-Ruskin, proposed for these breadth modules to be framed around the Sustainable Development Goals, so that students who complete these gain understanding and appreciation of the complexities of sustainability and the SDGs. So that slide is just clarifying what I've just said. I can share you her contact details if you would like to discuss this and gain a better understanding of how that's worked at Anglia-Ruskin. And then another example is mapping the SDGs across the whole of the undergraduate curriculum, which was carried out at the University of Winchester. We do actually offer this as a piece of consultancy work that SOS UK can support universities to carry out at their universities. But it's all about training students to develop the skill set to use this toolkit to identify where the SDGs fit across all of their undergraduate curriculum programs. So it's all about building on like their previous audits to then identify good practice and then also identify opportunities for improvement within that. It fits really closely with one of our Responsible Futures criteria, which you can't see very clearly, but it's within our baselines and benchmarks, which asks for partnerships to, within the last 5 years, the partnership has carried out a thorough baseline curriculum review or audit on SRS and published the findings. So Winchester did this, but they framed it all around the SDGs. So their curriculum audit was student-led. They mapped out the inclusion of the SDGs, and then they also included this with the university values and ESD pedagogy, so that they weren't just looking at content, but they were looking at ways of teaching and learning. And what this has led to is institution-wide engagement with the SDGs. The new institutional strategy is also being framed around the SDGs. That's now been launched. So this slide, I should have updated it to say that's been launched. And they've been able to identify so many pockets of good practice that, and like allies, so staff who are working in this area that they just weren't aware of before. They've been able to demonstrate student skill development and leadership, and they've gained loads of increased buy-in from faculties because they can see what a good thing this is and the benefits of it for their students. Yep. I think just one final thing to share with you on how institutions are engaging with the Sustainable Development Goals is that this year we hosted our third SDG Global Goals teach-in, which was really exciting. So it's where staff and students, so students can lobby their staff at their university to embed the SDGs, or like one of the SDGs, for example, in teaching and learning during the teach-in week. And people sign up on a sign-up form on our website. And this year, University of De Montfort came first for like the percentage of students reached through their embedding of the SDGs in teaching, learning, and assessment during that week. We saw 307 teaching staff in total engage with it, which then in turn 25,000 students experienced learning around the SDGs during that week, from a total of 24 institutions. In terms of resources, on our Responsible Futures resource bank, which you should have access to as a result of your membership of Responsible Futures, we actually have a sustainability A to Z, which is a great a set of case studies demonstrating where sustainability has been embedded in courses from A to Z. Lots of really great examples, and it goes from dentistry to religious studies, travel and tourism. Really, really useful. So thank you for my time, and I'm going to pass you over to the next speaker.
Okay, thanks, Meg. That was really insightful. Thank you to Caroline for providing an overview of the SDGs, and Meg for sharing the student perspectives on SDGs and how the wider university can contribute to delivering those messages of sustainability, and also the intervention framework for integrating SDGs at different levels. That was really interesting. So our next presenter, our next speaker, is Jaliyyah. So we're going to welcome Jaliyyah. If you'd like to share your webcam with us, Jaliyyah, and say hi. So the next section is going to be run as a bit of a question answer type interview with Jaliyyah.
Hello.
Hi, Jaliyyah. So Jaliyyah is an assistant professor from the Faculty of Business and Law at Coventry, and she's been doing some fantastic work around the SDGs within her faculty and beyond, a great champion. And so we've asked her to come and join us today and share some of that learning with you. So hi, Jaliyyah. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, and how did you start working with the SDGs?
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Ahmadu-Bello, as she said, assistant professor from the Faculty of Business and Law. And well, I like to consider myself as one of the champions in FBL. That's just about myself. And regarding to how I started working with the SDGs is that I have a little bit of knowledge about the Millennium Development Goals, which was another United Nations development initiative that ran from 2000 to 2015. During my undergraduate year, I heard of these goals a lot. It is at their expiration that the SDGs came. But prior to the SDGs and my involvement in the SDGs, I had a little bit of industry experience. I was involved in writing feasibility reports, drafting terms of reference, and a lot of this work had to do with sustainable development. It could be from the perspective of clean energy or waste energy, or even local content policy in terms of foreign companies operating in Africa. So when the SDGs started to make waves, a combination of what I would say a little bit of industry experience, some prior knowledge, sort of drove me to engaging with the SDGs, and I had to research them, found out that this time around, the United Nations goals came with targets and indicators, which made them really good framework to work with. I think about that.
Thank you. And why do you think that learning about the SDGs is important?
To begin with, the goals are designed to improve lives all over the world. And when these particular goals came into existence, there was a lot of campaign about them, especially using the tagline, "Leave no one behind." So why not in our classroom? We, after all, are educators. Coventry University in particular has a strong standing for global education. We have a large number of international students. So we live in this globalized world, and therefore we need to incorporate global education, we need to just, give out global education. I say globalized world, I know it comes with benefits and ills, and COVID-19 is one example of the ills. But for me, it started with my platform, and my platform is the classroom. When I was doing campaigning about SDGs, I always tell people to use, their sphere of influence. I'm a lecturer, so my classroom is my sphere of influence, you can call it that. And before the SDGs, education institutions, you've seen examples from Meg, have been involved in a lot of sustainable initiatives over the years. There was PRIME, which is the Principles for Responsible Management Education. This is more like a business school focus. That was Education for Sustainable Development. So we do have a part to play. And all of these development initiatives came about because of the realization of key competent skills that are needed, because we face challenges from, climate crisis, inequality, poverty. That's just to mention a few. In addition, what made the SDGs really unique is that throughout its processes, its framework and reviews, youths were involved in the process of adopting SDGs. Youths, you can say maybe 15 to 24, according to the UN, but we have a slightly higher, so maybe from 18, most of our students, 18 to 24, they form the larger percentage of our students at any given time. So they do matter because they are the future leaders, and they need to know that they matter. This is why it is very, very important. Lastly, according to why embedded in my class is that these key competent skills are needed to provide, of course, future leaders, global leaders. Remember that these students stay with us 3 to 4 years. So we hold that crucial, responsibility to sort of mold them into global leaders. And I think it's very important to embed them in your class for that reasons.
Thank you. That's great advice. And for those people that may be right at the start of their journey of looking to embed the SDGs, can you tell us about what was the first change that you made?
Oh, this is interesting. So before the SDGs, I was hiding from social media. But when they started to make wave, there was a lot of noise about them. And I just found myself, checking what is happening with the SDGs on Twitter. And then I started with social media campaign. That was the first step I took. So it was about awareness to general public with a group of campaigners, a group of advocates. From there, we just sort of naturally went into little interventions. Example, we had a medical reach out. We were raising funds for internally displaced persons. We were, organizing book drive to support some libraries. We didn't get funding. We were just doing it from a particular organization. We were just bringing out and stating our ideas, and people were just contributing. It's very, very interesting how people felt responsible to do things without being forced to. But in my teaching role, I made it a conscious effort to discuss the SDGs in class. And if I have anything around the SDGs, I try to share it on my module pages. It's very important because last year, was it in October, we had the first climate crisis meeting in Coventry, and the turnout was really great from our students, plus Warwick University students. So I realized that, even though, I'm not very engaged with the students, but prior to then, I need to sort of engage myself with the student and share any information with them, because you never know, you cannot tell who is interested in certain things or not. That's what I do.
That's great, thank you. And what I'm really interested to hear is how is that kind of learning received by the students?
To be honest, they value it a lot, and it also does depend on the different activities we do. We did a lot of activities over the years. So like we had a field trip to New York, and I know, I shouldn't be talking too much about encouraging flying, but we did that because it was an educational field trip, and the students had the opportunity to to have a chat, like a briefing, which was led by the UN Director for Global Outreach. He discussed with them the issue of understanding the SDGs and also considering themselves as partners in achieving the SDGs rather than beneficiaries of the SDGs, which was really good. Students appreciated that, and I could tell because they told me, and some of them requested for references after they've gone back to their home country, saying that they want to apply to, UN-related opportunities in their countries. That's just one example. There's several other examples from the ethical finance and responsible investment session we had. This was organized by the Treasury team and the sustainability team for Coventry University. It was led by Riz Danani and Selina Fletcher. I don't know if you've met Selina. Have you met her?
Yeah, Selina's been doing great work across the university.
So this particular program was organized by Riz Danani and Selina Fletcher. Students got back to us saying, they want to get involved in more sustainability-related events in the university, especially where their opinions are being asked, especially where they are part of the discussion. They felt relevant, which is really important. There was also the Circular Economy Hackathon. This was organized by Professor Benny. He's from CBIS, that is Center for Business and Society. Again, it made a good impact on people, on students. So there are a lot of examples. I'm also conscious of time, but there are a lot of examples to give. We still have an ongoing webinar series, which is about risk, governance, ethics, and sustainability webinars. This is organized by Shane. It happens like every other week. The next one is coming up in May, and it's going to touch on governance, environmental sustainability, law, and energies. I'm looking forward to that because during the last webinar, one of the professors was encouraging us about, investing in he was talking about, not encouraging, talking to us about investing in the oil sector because of an estimate that was made prior to COVID-19. I'm sure you saw the news from yesterday with the drop in oil prices, so it'd be interesting to hear what would carry on from then.
It's very topical, isn't it? Definitely with the news and things that are happening all the time. And today you've got some great examples of where you've embedded SDGs into the curriculum already within your faculty and outside of your faculty. I was part of one of the SDG hackathons, which was fantastic, well received by the students, and I enjoyed it too. But we are running out of time. So I think finally, what would you advise to somebody at the start of this journey? And what would you say to help them get started with embedding the SDGs into their curriculum?
I will say research the goals. It's very important to read the targets and, if possible, the indicators. This will really help you identify which goals you are interested in. So I would advise that you have your intended learning outcomes. If you don't have that, you can have the indicative contents of your module while researching the goals. That would be the first thing to do. Research the goals is very, very important. You can start small. As a university or a faculty, it's easy for us to cover all of the 17 goals. But as an individual, leading one module or two, start small. Check about the goals and probably contact somebody who is already working on the goal, maybe your curriculum 2025 representative. Anybody that is working on the goal would be a good example for you to contact. Attend the webinars and seminars and workshops. There were a lot of workshops that took place last year, 18-19 and 19-20. Unfortunately, we could not go ahead with the one we planned together with Nik and Mujtaba for Faculty of Business and Law. But I do know that Mujtaba has, swapped these workshops to be webinars in the next semester. So it will be really important if you attend them. These are the main examples or the main, points I'll highlight when you want to engage with the SDGs.
Thank you, Jaliyyah. That's really helpful, and it's definitely given me some inspiration and some actionable points to go away with. So thank you so much for that. And please do get in touch with Jaliyyah. We've got her contact details at the end if you'd like to ask her any further questions. So we're going to move on now to the panel Q&A, and we've been collating your questions that have been coming through, so thank you to those. I'm going to hand you over to Nik now, who will be hosting the questions and putting them to our panel. So over to you, Nik.
Thank you, Stacey. Hopefully my camera will kick into action soon and we'll be able to see me. So we had some fairly active chat there, so a few questions to put to the panel. We might not get through all of them, so I'm going to get through as many as we can, and anything else we can post later. So I think I'll kick off with something that came fairly directly from some of the things that Jaliyyah was talking about. So particularly had a question that I think Jaliyyah and Meg might be quite good to answer, which was around the key competencies, particularly that Jaliyyah referred to, that we think students are going to need in the future. So could you give us an idea of what those are?
Sorry?
Could you give us an idea of those key competencies that you mentioned that students are going to need? So skills and competencies.
Yes, I mean, there are quite vast ones, but the most important ones will be around system thinking, challenging assumptions, complex perspective, and also critical analysis. There are quite vast, but the most important one, I think, is the system thinking and critical analysis. You see, it's we do have some modules, for instance, within FBL that develop this naturally. For instance, the law school, they have these clinical education programs whereby students while learning actually go and work with the community. They work with the law center on several issues from, including social security appeals and things like that. Also, we have students working on together with small businesses, helping them from information to marketing to data. So these are the kind of skills that we want to see. In essence, we want to sort of bridge that gap between, education and the actual practice of what is happening after you leave school.
Brilliant. So I noticed, Meg, you were kind of nodding away there at the beginning, particularly around the idea of critical analysis, critical thinking, systems thinking skills. Yep. Would you agree? Is that something that you're seeing through your work as important skills?
I just think that it's a key competency when it comes to education for sustainable development and ensuring that students and students as graduates have the skills and capabilities to think in a sustainability minded way, because if you can't think about the whole system, you end up making choices which undermine the importance of other factors within the global system that we live within. We're part of an ecosystem and we can't deny that. And I think that it's often we look quite human centrically, and not to become very green in what I'm trying to communicate, but I think that actually a lot of the problems that we're facing are a result of a single-minded approach and a one-track approach, without realizing that we're interconnected with other humans across the planet, interconnected with ecosystems, with the atmosphere, and there are so many factors involved that systems thinking is so important.
It's almost like the SDGs really emphasizes the global aspect of the skills and competencies that we'd kind of always been focused on anyway, but they help you see it in a new light to really see why it's so important in today's world.
Yeah. The only thing I would like to add to this is what Jaliyyah actually was talking about in her Q&A session of values, and values is so important, and that connects with trying to promote interdisciplinary learning opportunities, which then in the long term leads to really successful partnership working. Because when you're doing interdisciplinary learning whilst you're a student and you're studying, then when you graduate, you recognize the value of working in partnership with others who don't necessarily have the expertise that you have, but you value their expertise and they value yours. And hopefully that then enables you to identify how you can carry your values with integrity into your future professional life and your social life. It kind of, they interconnect.
Brilliant. So that kind of encapsulates quite well all the things that we want of our students. But something that came through quite a lot in the chat was, how do we prepare staff for this? So I wonder if I could pass over to perhaps Caroline and Stacey to tell us a little bit about what are we doing to prepare staff to be able to develop these skills and competencies in students.
Okay, well, as I can't see Stacey, I'll assume I'll take that one for now. So I think the best part of 2,000 people took part in the initial curriculum in 2025 sort of awareness materials, and we're moving on now in that this webinar is the first of a series of kind of follow-on events where we move from an awareness that it needs to be done to actually starting to do it. And I do believe somebody called Nik Beer might also be preparing further curriculum 2025 follow-on course. And is it going to be on Moodle, or is it going to be on something else?
Oh, it'll be in a variety of places.
But then a really important next thing is that people aren't feeling on their own. Mojtaba's put in the chat a link to an ESD working group sharing best practice. And of course, that's what we're here for. If people are struggling, can't quite see the connection, can't identify good examples, then that's what we're here for. So just give us a call, and we can hopefully bring together that knowledge of sustainable development that we've got with your own discipline expertise, and find some kind of meeting in the middle. There are some, there's still one or two courses which do find it harder to make the connection. But it would be a point of challenge. It's not possible not to put it in every course.
I don't know if this is, well, I just want to add that for some people, it might just be the case of relating what they are already doing with the goals rather than embedding it, because I'm sure a lot of people are doing a lot, and we have to be careful about overburdening the curriculum. So some people are already doing a lot of work. So it might be the case of relating rather than embedding the SDGs into their curriculum.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Julia.
Excellent. Okay, so something else that came out quite strongly was the idea of engaging students as co-creators, and ensuring that when we do that they're given the correct recognition for their work, including sometimes being paid for it. I was wondering, Meg, if you had, if you knew of any examples from your work with other universities whereby students have been engaged as co-creators, and what kind of recognition they might get for that.
The payment aspect's a really interesting one, so I'll just talk about that briefly first, because it definitely depends on the context and the role or responsibility that students will be given to how often I see that they're getting paid for it by the university or whatever. And then as NUS's sustainability team, and then now as SOS UK, we carry a lot of the same values through as a new organisation. So we as an organisation will only ever promote paid placements. Unless a student can get academic credits, we will then occasionally consider it, but it would need to be for a limited amount of time, because we believe that students should be paid for the time that they're spending on things, and also that ensures that all students have the opportunity to participate in opportunities, because students may not be participating in things because they can't afford to do these things for free when they would otherwise be working for paid work to support a family or other dependents, or just pay to live, you know. So that's the payment aspect. In terms of students as co-creators, the most common way that I see this happening is through the role of lots of institutions call them different things. So student reps, course reps, faculty reps, school reps, and having a role like Keele University have a good example. They've launched sustainability reps. So they're the same sort of thing as a school rep or a faculty rep, but the students have a focus within that remit to only focus on, well, to prioritize sustainability and looking at how their course could be improved for sustainability and where sustainability could feature more. And so they're using that role to empower the students to be co-creators in the sustainability element of course design and course improvement and development. Like at a very basic level, within Responsible Futures, one of the criteria is that students are frequently asked in surveys or in some shape or form where or how sustainability features in their curriculum learning. And the most obvious way of achieving that is to put it in your module feedback forms, whatever you call them at Coventry. And so then when a student is completing that, if they're saying that they're getting experience of that, if they're not and they're not happy with it, they would like to see more, then you're seeing the students as a co-creator. You're valuing their input and their perspective of that. So that's like very basic. That'd be like your quantitative way of having students as co-creators. And then there's other institutions that have focus groups or students' unions being really empowered. The role of students' union officers, the education officers, embedding sustainability within their roles to ensure that where they sit on so many boards that they're using their roles to kind of progress the embedding of sustainability within the curriculum. So there's lots of ways I see that happening.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'm very conscious of time. We have less than a minute left. So although we have more questions, I'm going to wrap that section up there. And what we'll do is perhaps try and get some kind of brief answers to the questions that I've collated, and we'll post them later, as I'm sure everyone's keen to go for lunch. So I'm going to hand back to Stacey now just to wrap up. If you have any more questions, do please continue to post them and I'll collect them later.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for everybody for posting your questions. And a huge thank you to our speakers today, every one of you, for joining us and taking the time. That brings us to the end of our webinar. We hope that you've enjoyed it, and we hope we've given you some food for thought. You can access further resources. So I've just put the slide there for useful resources with our Curriculum 2025 Toolkit, which you can access through the Moodle page and through the links on the slides that we'll make available. And as what's already been mentioned, there are further workshops led by Java and Academic Development. So please have a look at those. You can access them through the booking system, through the staff development page. So thank you again. Thank you everybody for your time, and the recording will be available along with the slides and further resources.
Thank you.
And useful contacts.